No more talk about the beast in the East. Grambling State is your SWAC baseball champions, and every step of the way, they turn the East to a feast. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey's over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's a holiday, not just because it's Memorial Day. And thank you for making me a part of your Memorial Day festivities. I'm dropping this early, so maybe you on the grill and you got the Mouth of the South in the background. But this is also a holiday because we have changed our theme music to our opening little montage, if you want to say. We even changed the visuals too, if you're on the YouTube section. But that song comes from a good friend of mine, right? So I'm going to call him by the professional name, 97, but that's my guy. So thank you, Brethren, for that. That being said, we wrap up today's episode with a look at a double feature of HBCU athletes who have punched their ticket to the NCAA Track and Field National Championship in Eugene, Oregon, moving beyond the preliminary stages. And yes, Jamarion Stubbs continued his shining streak. But we kick it off with our new SWAC baseball champions, and that is your Grambling State Tigers. I was upset because you know what I wanted, and I don't just mean the victor. I had a very specific SWAC championship game that I wanted to see. I wanted to see Texas Southern, right? And yes, I got it on my chest because I'm corny like that. And my guy happened to go to TSU, so I'm showing a mad TSU love right now. You know what I'm saying? But that being said, I wanted to see Texas Southern versus Grambling. That is the game that I wanted to see. I did not get half of it, but I did get Grambling in the game. TSU was nowhere to be seen because, man, when I tell you, I wanted to see how Texas Southern would compete against those teams in the East, and I got exactly what I wanted on that front. When it comes to seeing how they would compete against some of the Eastern teams that they just didn't face, I think the only team that they faced in the East was Jackson State, and that was very early, if not the first game, one of the first 3 to 4 games of the season at the Cactus Jack Classic. Well, they had their chance against Jackson State in the first round, got dog walked. I mean, look, it got ugly fast, 17-4. That's a dog walking. And then you went into the losers bracket, right? The consolation bracket to make you feel better, but it's the losers bracket, and you get to face Prairie View A&M. Now, one thing I can say, when it ain't football, we can knock off Prairie View A&M, and that's exactly what they did. Texas Southern got very comfortable, and they faced the West team. They came up victorious in that. All right, cool. Now you got Bethune-Cookman. Can you beat Bethune-Cookman? No, that's 16-0. Another dog walking. When it came to facing the East, it sure looked like it was the beast in the East. But Grambling said, don't worry, I'm going to give you half of your matchup because I don't want to hear none of that beast talk. It's all about feast talk. And it's all you can eat buffet when Grambling State comes this way. So you look at the very first game that they had to go against, it was Alabama State. Grambling played 6 games in this SWAC tournament, right? Grambling played 6 games, and every single one of them was against an East team. It went Alabama State. You won that game. Also, they went 5-1 for the record. The only loss was in the first time they played FAMU. You had Alabama State, 6-3 dub. Go against FAMU, 17-7 loss. Then you go back against Alabama State again, 11-10. FAMU again, 9-3. FAMU again, 14-11. So you look at it, they went 5-1. The only game that they lost was that first Florida A&M matchup. And it was all everywhere, man. Score-wise, it was very erratic when you're looking at how each of Grambling State's victories would go. The centralized theme was you kept going against the same opponents. You went against Alabama State twice. You went against FAMU 3 times. That's their lead up to the championship game. We haven't got to that yet, right? So the championship game was not against Florida A&M. But you went against the same opponents repeatedly. You had a mini series against FAMU, if you're going to be honest, and you won that 2-1. But neither here nor there. The other centralizing factor to me, right? Because when you look at this game, the runs are everywhere. The fielding's everywhere. You either allow double digit when you're looking at Grambling. When you look at Grambling before they get to the SWAC championship, you're either allowing double digit runs or you're less than 5. And that actually didn't change. They allowed less than, or they allowed 5 on the dot in that game. But Grambling was kind of shaky. But the centralizing theme for Grambling was they faced the same squads the entire way, Alabama State and FAMU, but then also they could count on having an explosive inning almost in every game. And the most notable one was a 6-run inning in the second game against FAMU, because in the second game against FAMU, you're obviously on the brink of elimination. You cannot afford to lose again because you lost to FAMU the first time. And it was bad. It was 17-7. That was a big gap. So now you come back around and I think at that time it may have been 3-0. Or no, I think it was 3-1. FAMU was up 3-1 because in the 6th inning, trying to make sure I get all my memory right. In the 6th inning, FAMU had 3 runs. So now that brought the score to 3-1. You was leading. It was really bad. Like both teams were struggling offensively in that second game. So how do you respond? You know what I'm saying? You ever see that magic clip? Hey, you got to get them back. That's exactly what what Grambling did. In that 7th inning, Grambling, I keep wanting to say the wrong team, so excuse me for the hesitation, but Grambling rattled back, and they had 6 runs in that 7th inning, and that was really what trampolined them to victory. When you look at it, the game was 9-3. Those 6 runs made all of the difference, and that's just kind of what would happen randomly, a 5-run inning, a 4-run inning. And then when you go against Jackson State, who you faced in a championship game, I don't think there's much need to talk about Jackson State, but this is another East team. When you look at Jackson State, you don't really have that explosive inning. What you have is a very clutch play in the bottom of the 9th. So let's read through how the bottom of the 9th went, because obviously when you win a game in the last inning, that's typically the most pivotal moment of a baseball matchup, right? Like I would say most times when you have something like this. Let's read how the 9th inning went, because Grambling took advantage of all of the miscues by Jackson State. Jackson State simply could not afford to screw up the way that they did in the moment that they did. So let's lead up to Trevor Hatton's 2-run RBI to close out this game. The first thing we have to look at is the errors on Jackson State's part. So the first hit should have been a single, but you have an error. Now the runner gets the second. Then the second at bat, you walk him. Okay, cool. Got a runner on first and second, you'll live. The next guy, you get an out on that at bat, but he does get a hit, and it leads to now those 2 runners going in a scoring position. They're at third and second. The next one, you walk the next batter. So now you've had 2 walks in the first 4 at-bats, and the bases are loaded with 1 out. That's a recipe for disaster. What you can hope for if you're Jackson State is that either A, your pitching steps up and you strike out these next 2 guys and now you've won, or maybe just a sac fly right here and now you can't do it again. Maybe that's what you're hoping for. We'll get the game tied. We'll go into extra innings. But no, you have yet another error, right? So you get an RBI. It was going to be a game-tying run by Trevor Hatton. The Trevor Hatton's RBI would have led to a game-tying run, but then you have yet another error, and that leads to the game-winning run. So when you look at the bottom of the 9th, it was extremely important because Jackson State enters the bottom of the 9th up 1. You have 2 errors. You walk 2 batters, and now because of what you've done, right? These are issues on you. You've now put the bases loaded, and then you gave up the game-tying and game-winning run because of your own errors, because of your own walking of the batters. This is for me, you have to give credit to Grambling because they took advantage of it. Not everybody could have. You easily could have led to a strike. You easily could have swung at a couple of pitches that were on the fence. But you know what? That's the way the cookie crumble, baby. Because Jackson State, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was because they played Bethune-Cookman 3 games in a row. If I'm not mistaken, Jackson State made it to this game on a walk. Literally, the bases were loaded and they got walked, and that's how they got here. No disrespect, they were really good, but hey, sometimes it's how the cookie crumbles. What go for you goes against you. Now, speaking of going against you, one person I don't want going against me is Jamarion Stubbs, the Alabama State sprinter. He does it again. He looks amazing in the 200. Let's break down that and also clarify some of the rules and some of the terminology when it comes to NCAA track and field national championships, because I want to explain that in a little bit deeper depth as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. And listen, you got something wrong with your car? Maybe you just want to fix it up. I don't know. Either one is acceptable. I ain't judging. Trust the Lord knows that some things be wrong with my car. That's why you go to eBay Motors, right? I know somebody who has been fixing up an old car for years upon years. And that's okay, because every time that he gets parts, he goes to eBay Motors. And it's a labor of passion, but eBay Motors allows it to be a labor of economic efficiency, right? So when you look at it, it doesn't matter because they got 120 million parts for you, specifically for your car. You'll be able to find whatever it is that you need. So if you need an alternator, you need a muffler, you need, well, you just maybe just want some LED lights, right? Power, passion, style. They have everything that you could possibly look for as far as utility and then also aesthetics. So go to ebaymotors.com. That is ebaymotors.com. For any of your car needs, they'll have everything that you could desire. Go to ebaymotors.com. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today, the first of its kind 24/7 live sports network on YouTube. So go to Locked On Sports Today and subscribe. Jamarion Stubbs has continued his hot streak into the quarterfinals, and he has punched his ticket into the NCAA national championships in track and field. I don't feel like I gave the proper baseline on all of the information. So before we get into Brother Stubbs, allow me to give some more information on how this whole track and field situation works, right? Because not everybody's in the track and field. Not everybody knows the rules of track and field. When I say into, I mean deeply follows. A lot of us are just like, okay, who's running when they running? Oh, Sha'Carri. Shout out Sha'Carri. She did good yesterday. So I was watching that before everything else transpired on Sunday. But anyway, also, we're not having an episode tomorrow. Just so you know, we're not having an episode tomorrow. Please enjoy your Memorial Day. Please and get on the grill, do what you do, enjoy your day, because Lord knows I will. So I won't be back with an episode that night. But yes, well, we will be back on Wednesday. That being said, with NCAA national championships, it's 2 periods for this. So you have the preliminaries and then you have the national championships. And I think I just called it nationals because if I'm not mistaken, it does say NCAA track and field national championships preliminary round, but there should be a distinction placed between the prelims and nationals. So for me as a MMA guy, I'm a huge MMA guy. I just think, okay, prelim, main card. The only difference is you got to work your way on the prelims to make it to the main card. So you have in the prelims, which are regional, you have an East and a West. We're all in the East. All of us being HBCUs. You have the first round and the quarterfinals. If you make it through those, you make it to nationals, which is your semifinals and your championship. So they're both broken up into 2 parts for the majority of them. Some are different, and I'll explain why one, specifically the 4x1, is a little bit different. That being said, the conversation about what's happened in the prelims has to start with Jamarion Stubbs. And I know that it kind of ended with Jamarion Stubbs on Friday, but if you're an everydayer, bear with me because I want to make sure that we know where we are. When we left on Friday, his second races had not happened yet. When we left on Friday, we were at a point where Stubbs had won his 100-meter heat, and he had won his 200-meter heat. Allow me to not only set the scene, not only catch people up, but also foreshadow a little bit by reflecting on what he did in his 100 and 200. In his 100, he had to come from behind, and he had when I talk about the narrowest of margins, I mean a very narrow margin of victory, but he did win his heat. Very tough heat, but I think that the way that he won that is very important. When you compare it, excuse me, when you compare it to how he won his 200, smoked him. I think the next closest person was 0.5 of a second behind. That's ridiculous. Smoked the competition. Now I've set the scene. Now I foreshadowed. Now I've caught you up had you maybe missed Friday's episode. So let's move forward for things that we hadn't seen. When you get to the quarterfinals in the 100, he still qualifies, but he's not an automatic qualifier, right? He was not. And we spoke about AQs versus I can't remember what the opposite is, but we talked about AQs in the Olympic trials and what you have to be to have to be an automatic qualifier in that. But this is a little bit different. So they take the top 3 runners in each heat and you automatically qualify for the next round. After that, you'll take the 3 fastest times of every racer or every runner who is not in that top 3. So when you look at what Stubbs was able to do in the 100, he did run a personal best 10:07, but at the same time, that wasn't good enough to place in the top 3 of his heat. It was 4th, but it was good enough to be one of those 3 fastest runners outside of, I wish I knew what that was called, but basically what it is, and he didn't have to wait for long, but basically if I run a heat 1 and I'm not one of the top 3, let's say I'm 4, I need to watch every other race to see if the 4th person and beyond ran slower than me. With Stubbs, he ran in the last heat, so he already knew once he finished, oh, I'm in, I'm good, green light. That being said, let's push forward to the 200 meter. In the 200 meter, this was a completely different ball game. It was a completely different ball game in the 200. He smoked the competition yet again. He ran a 1995. The next closest runner to him in his heat ran a 2014. Right. So you look at a 1995 versus a 2014. That's nearly 0.2 of a second. Once again, a pretty nice margin of victory. And when you watch it, it was just more fluid. When you watch Stubbs run the 200, you look at him and say, that's your event. At least that's what I've seen over these last 2 races. And he's a sophomore. And I think that's what makes this very interesting. Excuse me, is that he's doing this as a sophomore. And you know that he has time to develop even better. So his 10:07 and his 1995, those are personal best for him in each individual race. But you take the 1995 and add it to even more because no, it's not it's actually the second fastest time there, but it's the fastest time of an Alabama sprinter in the 200 meter ever. Right? Don't matter the event, doesn't have to be the NCAA Nationals, doesn't have to be the prelims, don't have to be the SWAC championship. There's no Alabama sprinter who has ran faster than a 1995. Jamarion Thomas at this prelims, right, in the quarterfinals, ran not only his personal best in 2 events, he also set an Alabama State school record in the 200 meter. It's different, man. When I tell you the way that he won in the first round plays a part in all of this, it does. It really does. So that being said, I want to move into some other people because it's not like it's just Jamarion Stubbs. He was arguably the front runner, but he's not the only person who was in here and was producing at a high level. So let's look at the other athletes, including North Carolina A&T, absolutely doing what North Carolina A&T does as we continue with Locked On HBCU. That's wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. So we looked at Jamarion Stubbs, the Alabama, excuse me, the Alabama State sprinter. But what about everybody else? Because track and field success is larger than Jamarion Stubbs, even if I do feel like he should be the primary kind of face of this year, at least. You still have guys like Jason Holmes out of North Carolina A&T. Let's go ahead and kick it off because the Aggies are well represented when it comes to the NCAA Nationals, or they will be at least. Once again, it's regional. So you had the East, you had the West. We're all over here on the East. Now it's time to go to Eugene, Oregon. And that's where the NCAA Nationals would be. So they have 5 athletes who have punched their ticket to golly, I got something in my throat, obviously. But North Carolina A&T has 5 athletes who will be donning their colors at Eugene, Oregon in the Nationals. Jason Holmes and Thomas Smith, fourth of his name, have qualified in the 110 hurdles. But then you look at the North Carolina A&T 4x1 team. So Holmes is a part of that. And you have a pair of young guys, as far as Holmes as a sophomore, Xavier Taylor as a freshman. Then you have Avion Reed and Caleb Jackson, who are both seniors. And that's who makes up that 4x1. So when you go to Holmes, Smith, Taylor, Reed, and Jackson, all 5 of those guys are going to be leading the charge for North Carolina A&T at Nationals. We'll get to the hurdlers in a minute. I want to attack that 4x1 team. That 4x1 team is very interesting to me because they haven't taken a step back all year. There's not a time where they ran a slower time. I went and I looked through, I was looking at Jason Holmes's runs and seeing what he had done this year, but he has also been on the 4x1 team. So I just kind of tracked their progress as I was also looking at his hurdles. They kicked off the year with a 42-13. Not great at all. But then the next race, they hit a 40-51. Then each single race after that, North Carolina A&T's 4x1 team has taken baby steps down and down, or better times after better times. Each time if they had, I think it was 6 to 7, 5 to 7. Not one time did they run a worse time than they did the meet before. That's progress on a different level. I got to appreciate that. It ended up with a 39-24, which was obviously the best time of their season in NCAA quarterfinals. The 4x1 is a little different. They didn't run 2. They didn't run 2 races. They ran 1, and they qualified immediately. So it's a tad bit different. That being said, they were 3rd in their heat, and that made them an automatic qualifier. And let's get to the hurdles now. Let's get to the hurdles because I thought I had more to say about them, but I don't really have much more in that realm. As for Holmes, because Holmes is somebody who will be representing North Carolina A&T 2 times over, he'll do it in the hurdles, the 110 hurdles, and he'll also do it in the 4x1. He had the second fastest time in his heat, which was also the second fastest time of all runners. He just so happened to be running with the fastest guy in there, and that's the guy from Auburn. Honestly, the dude from Auburn, I think, should be the leader in this. When you look at the fastest 110 hurdle time in the nation this year, it's him collegiately. When you look at who was first in this, it was him. It's a decent margin too that he's a lead. Like, so Holmes did phenomenal, but he's racing against this kid from Auburn, and that's who I think has got to be the favorite moving forward in the 110 hurdles. That being said, this is not locked on Auburn. You go ahead and check out Zach Blackerby if you want to hear about him. I don't even remember the kid's name. Best benefits of being out of college is I can call college kids kids. Beautiful. I love it. That being said, Holmes ran a 13-4, and that will be close to top 10 this year, right? I think that's about 11, if I'm not mistaken. He ran it with limited win. He's been approaching this time for a while. He's consistently ran in the 13-4s, and then he finally hit that 13-4 even. So when I compare him to a guy like Samuel Bennett, who Bennett has the 9th best time in the nation, right? Because all you have to do is run this time one time and it sticks. It's not as if they're going to average everything together. If I run a 4 flat, I ran a 4 flat, and that's going to be regarded as whatever it is going to be as far as everybody's best time. Bennett ran a really fast time. I think it was a 13:39. But he hasn't been really close to that outside of it. And he had a good amount of win on that day too. So when you combine those two factors, I can't say that I have more confidence in Bennett just because he's technically ran a faster time than Holmes has. Holmes has consistently been in the 13-4s. Bennett has been in the 13-5s. So with that being said, Bennett is also going to qualify. So I don't know if I kind of alluded to that by saying I can't have more confidence in him. He placed 6th in this race, and that was good to be as far as everybody, that was good to be an automatic qualifier. I think he was 2nd in his heat, if I'm not mistaken, 2nd or 3rd. But yeah, the 110 hurdle has been very kind. You have Holmes, you have Bennett, you have Thomas Smith the 4th, who also qualified. So that's 2 Aggies who are going to be representing North Carolina A&T, representing their school at this at this national event. Only one other school can say that, LSU. LSU is the only other school. And I think this is important. When you look at North Carolina A&T, they have a history of being very successful in track and field. The 110 hurdles, they have 2 hurdlers who are going to be competing in this event at NCAA Nationals. There's only one other school who can say that. That's LSU. But then when you look at the amount of runners that they had in this event, period, in the final, 3 heats of this, they had 3 athletes running 110 hurdles. Nobody else can say that. The track and field pedigree at North Carolina A&T is something that's going to clearly sustain moving forward. But also, let's go through a real quick note of James Brown out of Grambling, right? Not that James Brown, but he qualified in the long jump. He had jumped a 761, which was good for 6th place as far as everybody. He qualified to make it in the nationals. I think they also kind of had a different schedule where they just did one and then they went ahead and you just had, I don't know how to explain it, but they didn't have to have the whole opening round and then the quarterfinals. They just did their one time and then they went into the nationals after this. I think it's because they're going to have multiple jumps and you take the best one. So I think that's why they didn't have to go through multiple different sections, so to speak. Sorry, I need to stop. Come on. I need to drink some water. So I appreciate y'all. I will see you on Wednesday because we will not have an episode on tomorrow. So like they say, you can show up, but I won't be here. Maybe you'll run this again. Tell a friend to listen to it tomorrow. Listen to it today. Tell a friend to listen to it tomorrow. I better listen to it on Wednesday too, or her. Now, anyway, I appreciate y'all making this your first listen of the day every day and spreading the gospel. Until next time that we hear each other, family, take care. Stay blessed. Enjoy your Memorial Day. Peace.